I'm feeling good.
My name is Bonnie Waslick, and I'm the Director of Inclusive Excellence. I'm joined today with Dave Stovall, who is a professor at the University of Illinois Chicago, and he's a professor of Black Studies and criminology, law, and justice. And we're going to be working today to think about questions of anti-racism and anti-racist practices and policies across institutional spaces. So thanks so much for joining us today, Dave.
Definitely. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so I have a couple of questions for you, kind of go in order. And the first is, from your perspective, what does it mean to engage in anti-racist work as faculty or staff member at any university? Thinking either from your personal experiences or just across your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that becomes critically important is to understand that the university is never an innocent actor, right? I think when you are clear about that, now you have to go into the processes to say, how has the university participated in ways that have limited the access of people of color, whomever identified in that region or broader? And then in what ways have they committed to any form of redress? More important than the admission is the work that happens after it, right? So you have to be consistent in making sure that if you've identified these particular issues, now what are you doing actively to maintain or improve the conditions of students of color on that campus? So I think one of those things, the common mistake is that the university is the doer of good, right? And that's not necessarily the case, right? You really have to complicate that and say, if we have this indictment, then what is redress, right? And now how are we working to build redress based on historical and contemporary issues?
And I appreciate that, particularly for our context here at Penn State Abington, where we are a majority minority campus. And I think sometimes folks will say, we have a lot of students of color here on our campus, and therefore we're doing the work, right? And thinking about it more from a systemic perspective. I appreciate that.
Right. That's always the piece, especially when you've got large populations of students of color. You know, folks will say, well, everything is good. And all you have to do is look beneath the surface and say, no, it's not. And because it's not, here's what we need to be thinking about. And that thing around, because, you know, universities get into this thing, you know, you see this language of, you go to the continuous improvement workshop, right? And like, well, what is this, right? What's the intent here? And now how will we maintain presence and dedicate resources to the stated intent, right? So it's always holding folks to account to whatever is put on the table.
Absolutely, thank you. So the second question I have today are, what are the main thoughts or ideas that you would like faculty and staff at any university to think about in terms of engaging in anti-racist pedagogies, practices, and policies?
I think the most important thing is to understand that not to be paranoid about the current moment, right? We're in a tumultuous time, right? We're seeing, you know, a lot of things be overturned, whether it be Roe, whether it be affirmative action, but we've been here before, right? So now it's really this opportunity for folks to get clear about what they do, right? And so I don't see it as this thing where, you know, the sky is falling, but I see it as this space to say, all right, we have to recommit to what we've stated that we're going to do, right? And that recommitment includes now saying, okay, well, here's where these resources are going to. Here's how we are looking to shift policies that have not worked well. And then here's how we will mobilize a team to now be consistent. Because again, the follow through, especially at the university level, is critically important, right? Because you'll have these initiatives and then leadership leaves and then those initiatives just eviscerate, right? So now what is it that the university is intending or showing itself to do in this way? And I think a place like Abington becomes important because now they can say, look, we've had students of color here since its inception, So there is never going to be a moment where we are not talking about race, where we're not talking about class, we're not talking about gender, we're not talking about sexuality. That's just on the table, period, right? There will never be a moment where those things are not on the table. And I think this opportunity to say, this is where we are, and if you got problems, we'll deal with that accordingly, really becomes important. And I think now when people even use the terminology of anti-racism, folks get paranoid, right? Well, who's coming to sue?
Right.
This is really the opportunity to say, I expect them to come. So when they do, let's let the matter take care of itself. But there's never a moment where I do not expect them to come, right? And when they do come, hey, this is what we got, and here's what we do. I think this is really important for folks, especially institutions that serve large groupings of students of color, like my own, to really say, look, here's what it is that we have come to do. And because we've come to do it in these ways, there's never a moment where we will participate in the erasure of the identity of our students, right? And I think that's when you're clear about that, any of the things that come at you, you are more expectant of them, right? You don't panic when they come. You are expecting them to come because you have stated the claim, right? I think that really becomes important when we talk about any type of anti-racist work, when we talk about the naming of white supremacy and how it operates, when you talk about the legacies of colonialism and imperialism and how they live in 2023 in our particular institutions, I think those things now allow for some clarity around the work. And I don't want to belittle the moment, right? Because times are tough, right? You know, when we look at K-12 institutions, you know, schools, it's the toughest time to be a teacher in the last 80 years, right? But the thing is, we've been here before. So let's not be deterred, but now how are we students of history expectant of the white supremacist claim to come, and now we move accordingly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really significant there for me is the idea that if the table's been set and you're well aware of who all might come to the table, it's not suddenly you're scrambling to decide what you're going to serve and what that's going to look like. It's that these are sociocultural, political norms and values. And aside from just the values, the actions that sort of accompany that. And so I really appreciate that bit. So the third question is, if you could ask faculty and staff to make just one change in terms of the work that they do in a university setting that would focus on questions of race, what would it be?
To have some introspection, right? So this thing around how are you coming to your classrooms in relationship to race, class, gender, age, ability, sexual orientation? How do those identities, subjectivities inform what you do, right? Mm-hmm. Do you try to erase them, right? Or do you embrace them and use them as curricular tools for your particular courses? So it's never around, because a lot of times people are fearful of any type of conversation of identity, because in the United States, we're actually schooled and trained to erase that, right? Mm-hmm. In that idea around American exceptionalism, right? So you're here, so now suspend all these things that bring you to the table, when we know that's highly problematic and actually leads to much more cases of mental crisis, mm-hmm. right? So this thing around really saying, who am I in this space? How do I come to my particular classroom and students? And then after reflection, what do I need to improve, right? So this thing around, because this is the thing, right? In academia, people get into this thing around expertise, right? You know, you wrote this document that 5 people said, okay, can be signed off on, and now you're an expert. That is not true, right? So this thing around really saying, all right, look, if I'm actually engaged in a dynamic of exchange in a classroom, what am I trying to communicate? And then what am I willing to improve? And then that actually pushes you to another question. What is it that I don't know? Right?
Mhm.
And now how am I humble to the things that I do not know, but now have a commitment to engage, right? And I always talk about this, like I learned this heavily from members of the transgender community, right?
Mhm.
To folks, like I've had students transition while they are in my class, right? So this thing around how do you understand that in terms of what can you do to support your students, right? There's a ton of things that you may not know, but you can't place the weight on your students to now have all of those answers. But you can say, whatever it is that you need, understand that my job in all ways is to support you, right? And now there could be some mistakes made on my end, but at the same time, I will always move to support you because of what you've alerted me to, right? So this
Mhm.
thing around really being always being responsive to that. But I think that starts with introspection, right? That
Mhm.
that reflection to be able to engage, because once you engage in the reflection, there's the chance that it opens up your understandings to see those things that you may not understand, and to develop and to actually go out and seek resources for the things that you don't, so you can understand them more and continue to ask questions of them in relationship to how it appears to you. I think those things, because in universities, classroom space, faculty responsibilities are thought about very linearly, right?
Mhm.
It's this, that, have a class, fill out an evaluation, and that's that's not necessarily how life moves
No.
or is responsive to the particular needs of students and our own selves, right? So I think though that introspection into reflection really is key in this day and time.
Yeah, no, I absolutely appreciate that. Somebody once told me that when you get an advanced degree in this way, it should be the beginning of your journey, not the end. And so I really appreciate that reflection um, toward how folks could consider moving. The last question that I have is just any other thoughts that you'd have to share about engaging in anti-racist work at universities.
Yeah, I think you can't push off anti-racist work as this extra thing, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of times, people think about it as this thing that's added on to all the other stuff that you have to do. But it's really asking a contextual question, right? Where do I teach? Who are my students? How do I engage them? What are the things that I do not know? How am I trying to improve my craft as teacher, scholar, researcher, right? So this thing around really being able to push oneself and now
Mhm.
think about the work in a way that is connected to something, right? So it's not this just kind of one-off, uh, disparate type of work, right? It's connection work, right? It's really around understanding not only what you don't know, but now how do you make adjustments based on observations? Do you now start to ask different questions of your work? And I think that becomes important. So it's not this thing that's added on, but it's really asking you to ask some contextual questions that often go ignored, right? So that thing around really being clear, right, around what it is, and I focus on that, what it is that we don't know, because I have to be, as a cisgender heterosexual Black male, I gotta really understand some things that are assumed around my body, on around gender, that can border on advantage
Mhm.
and criminality, right? So this
Yeah.
thing around really being clear about how those things operate, and then being able to use resources if you don't know, right? So again, I'm always very intentional, and I think we should be very intentional about suspending this notion of expertise, right?
Mhm.
It's how are we, if it's one thing that we should be expert on is engagement, right? So how are we engaging folks because we have these particular inquiries, and opposed to being thought of as an authority on something when that could be very relative, depending on the situation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your thoughts on this topic. Please know that for us as a campus, this is just a beginning as we follow these themes all the way, not just through this academic year, but consistently through this office. So thank you so much in kicking off our engagement to those things.
Not a problem. Happy to engage with you, of course, as a longtime comrade. I don't know if that's dangerous for the tape, but at the same time, you know, folks who like yourself who are committed to this type of work and to do it in a way that is not only makes sense, but is connected to folks. So I appreciate that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
Yep.
Dragonfly out in the sun, you know what I mean, don't you know? Butterflies all having fun, you know what I mean. Sleep in peace when day is done, that's what I mean. And this old world is a new world and a bold world for me. Stars, when you shine, you know how I feel. Scent of the pine.